2019 meeting of the City Council for the City of Hutchinson. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Here.
Dave Lang?
Here.
Soldner?
Here.
Hyros de Carvalho?
Here.
Inskeep?
Here.
Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Gary's going to offer the prayer today. Thank you, Gary.
You're welcome. Shall we pray? Our gracious Heavenly Father, we are so grateful for this land that we live in, the freedoms that are ours as Americans, the opportunities that are ours as well. We are grateful for this community in which we live, for those who serve us in this chamber and in various other ways throughout our community. We ask for your watchful eye upon them today. We pray for safety as they go about their business. I pray for the discussions, the decisions that are made in this chamber that affect our citizens would be wise ones, guided by you, with input from our community on what's good for all of us. Again, we're grateful for this, and I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Gary. Next item.
Item 4, a proclamation for Bike Month and Bike to Work Day.
This is one kind of near and dear to my heart. Justin and Terry join me at the podium. Very good. All right. Whereas the bicycle is a viable and environmentally sound form of transportation and an excellent form of recreation, and many residents of Hutchinson will experience the joys of bicycling during the month of May through group rides, commuting events, or just getting out and going for a ride. And whereas Hutchinson's road and trail system creates a vibrant, physically active community, providing economic and health benefits to citizens of Hutchinson, and these bicycling activities and road and trail improvements have great potential to positively impact Hutchinson's economy and tourism industry, and to stimulate economic development by making the city attractive to businesses and citizens who enjoy the outdoors and healthy lifestyles. And whereas creating bicycle-friendly communities has been shown to improve citizens' health, well-being, and quality of life, to boost community spirit, to improve traffic safety, and to reduce pollution and congestion. And whereas the Vitality Team, Heal Reno County, Hutchinson Recreation Commission, the Hutchinson Reno County Chamber of Commerce, Hutchinson Community Foundation, the Reno County Health Department, Harley's Bicycles, and other companies and civic groups throughout Hutchinson will be promoting bicycling as a leisure activity as well as an environmentally friendly alternative to the automobile during the month of May 2019. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, David A. Inskeep, Mayor of the City of Hutchinson, hereby proclaim the month of May 2019 as Bike Month and Friday, May 17th, 2019 as Bike to Work Day. Be it further resolved that the Hutchinson City Council encourages all who support bicycling to participate in the events planned and urges all road users to share the road safely with bicyclists. Do either of you or both of you have some things you want to add?
I'd like to say a little bit.
Please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Inskeep and members of the City Council. I am proud to accept this proclamation on behalf of the Vitality Team of Hutchinson and Reno County and the Hutchinson cycling community at large. I want to say thank you to the City of Hutchinson for supporting ongoing projects that improve and expand facilities for safer cycling and pedestrian modes of transportation. There are several projects now in design or construction that will improve the bike infrastructure and contribute to the overall wellness and quality of life in our city. There are several events taking place in Hutchinson during Bike Month. This past Sunday, we had one of our biggest annual events, the Sand Plum Bicycle Classic. About 150 riders participated in this event, covering distances of up to 50 miles. Including our mayor. This Saturday, you are all invited to join the Second Saturday Cyclists group on a go-at-your-own-pace ride to Pleasant View for breakfast at the Dutch Kitchen. Our group rides to a different nearby town each month, May through August, for breakfast. On May 16th, the Vitality Team will be sponsoring events for young riders as part of Third Thursday downtown. There will be age group races and other activities. And as the mayor mentioned, May 7th is National Bike to Work Day. There will be stops at various locations around town where commuters can pause to enjoy some coffee and breakfast treats. I'd also like to mention that on June 8th at the sports arena, Reno County Health, Fire, and Police will conduct a kids' bike radio and safety clinic with free bike helmets donated by Harleys. In closing, I want to thank the Hutch Rec for their partnership with and support of the Vitality team. Also, a big thanks to the Parks Department, specifically Justin Combs and Sean Thomas, for their continued efforts to provide Hutchinson residents with safer and more accessible recreation and active living facilities.
Thank you.
Good morning, Justin Combs, Director of Parks and Facilities. Terry really covered everything. The one thing I just wanted to follow up on is please be aware of cyclists, not just on the 17th on Bike to Work Day. You probably will see more cyclists out that morning and that afternoon, but just every day, please just be more aware of cyclists. I'm sure Dave's got some great stories to tell. So all too often there are car bicycle accidents, so just encourage everybody to be aware of cyclists. So again, thank you.
Thank you both. Yeah, I have no incidents to report this morning, though. It was a nice, fun ride in. Very good. Next item, if you would, please.
Item 5, oral communications from the audience.
Perfect. This is the portion of the meeting where we invite those in the audience that have something they want to present to the council that is not on the agenda. If you choose to exercise that right, if you'd announce your name and your address, and then limit your remarks to 5 minutes, please. Very good.
Zoe Shum, 3216 Northwestern. I'm here as part of the Cinco de Mayo team, and I just wanted to thank you all. We had our festival this past weekend, and it was a great success, and I just wanted to thank you guys, and also let you guys know that it is a joy to work with the city on this festival, especially Steve Allen. He is amazing, and he allows us to do really what we need to do to make it work. So I just wanted to thank you guys for that, and let you know that we really enjoy working with you all on that festival.
Wonderful.
So
Very
that's
good.
it.
Thank you. I heard great things about it, and it's always nice to hear good comments about staff and how they work together. So wonderful. Anybody else want to exercise their right? Going once? Okay, very good. Seeing none. Next item, please.
Item 6, consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Tyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 7A, resolution regarding publication requirements.
Paul Brown, City Attorney. I'll tell you up front, Council, the only change on that resolution is a publication requirement from 3 consecutive days to 1 day. The rest of that is a little, not really complex, but not very interesting.
At least you're honest, Paul.
It's the, we charter out from under the original statute because the dollar limitation in the statute is $2,000. And this statute requires a formal engineer's estimate for public improvement projects. So that's initially why we charter out from under the state statute. Our number is 25,000. Okay. And then there are some exceptions in our resolution for construction manager at risk, which you saw with the sports arena, and for other types of projects. But the idea of the charter out is to get away from the $2,000 limitation. You don't want a formal engineer's estimate on a $2,000 job. Okay. The publication requirement took a while to find that. I never found it. I finally contacted our bond counsel. I said, "Can you find it? Is this a municipal bond matter?" And he says, "No, it's in a version that's prior to 1981 that's not even in the bound volume." So our staff for some time had asked me, "Why are we doing this? We don't want to do this. Make it go away." So now this is my attempt to make it go away from 3 days to 1 day, which is really what we're doing anyhow. So please approve this resolution.
You said something right there then, really what we're doing anyhow. Is that the case? We've been doing it on a one-day basis?
A lot of it. But actually, the statute we charter out from under says 1 day.
Oh, okay.
So we're
Consistency.
consistent either way.
Gotcha.
And that's the only change being
Yes,
made.
absolutely the
The
only
other
change.
items that you mentioned have been in place and
Everything you've
occurring.
approved before.
Any
I
other
move
questions?
to approve resolution enacting substitute or additional provisions of KSA 13-107 relating to public improvements, estimate of cost of improvements, contracts and bids and bond issues, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
All right, been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent,
Yes.
Dave Line,
Yes.
Soldner,
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho.
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 8A, consider request to rename Avenue A Park, Smallville Park.
Yeah, Mayor, Council, you, in your packet, we received a application request from Chris Wietrich on the renaming of the Avenue A Park to Smallville Park. And in your packet is a copy of the information provided along with the city's recently adopted park naming, park facilities, building facilities naming policy that you had a chance to review. And that's really all I have at this point in time, and let Chris make his formal presentation to you then.
He must have superpowers because I was going to ask him to approach the podium, and he was ahead of the curve.
I know the drill.
You know, he's been here before. If you'll
Yeah.
announce yourself and
Christopher Wietrich,
Thank
10
you.
West Avenue A,
Perfect.
Hutchinson. So last time I was here, I was in a very hot, skin-tight green leather suit, so this is probably a little weird. I promised to be short with you guys. I only got a couple pages here. Part of the reason I wore that costume last year has to do with this shirt. This is the actor who plays him on television. Obviously, this is not a real word, sincerely, but it has some real meaning behind it. When he's not doing his part on the show, he's working behind the scenes to raise money for charities and awareness for different issues. When I saw this shirt, I had to buy it immediately. He ended up selling almost 50,000 shirts and gave all the money to charity. But this word, even though it's not real, it does have a meaning, and its meaning is basically have the ability to speak freely, openly about anything you believe in that can benefit the community or people around you. And that's what I'm here to do today. And like he said, if you're going to say something, say it sincerely.
Sincerely.
You've all received the proposal, and it does have a lot of ideas and thoughts behind it about the future. About 5 years ago, I started a petition for this same cause. And back then I realized we were way too early in the Smallville campaign to meet any of the criteria for doing something like this. I recently noticed the focus by the city on the parks, and over the last year and the future of the parks, I've been to a couple of the meetings and have learned quite a bit from those meetings. So I felt this was a good time to get this back into the mix. I mentioned it on social media a few months ago, and a few days later, Corey, raise your hand, Corey, owner of Smallville Comics, Gaming and More, sent me a message saying he had started the petition. So I had to start working and run with it. I know he can tell you, you're coming up on a year anniversary of that store being open. And I know he's told me personally that people will stop in front of his store just because of the name. And I'm sure he could expand on that and tell you how his business has grown in the last year. Now I would argue with anyone that the block between Avenue A and B on Main Street is the most beautiful block in this town. I'll argue that to my death. As a teenager, I rode my bike downtown to watch that park being built. It's my favorite spot in town, and I'm glad I get to live across the street from it now. I've wondered for years, though, why it's one of the few parks in town that doesn't really have a name that symbolizes something. So that's why I'm here to discuss why Smallville Park. The easiest way for me to say why is because we are the only actual real Smallville, Kansas. If you do a Google search on Hutchinson, Kansas, or Smallville, Kansas, a majority of what you're going to find in those Google searches is going to lead back to Hutchinson, which is pretty amazing. If you search the Smallville comics specifically, it lists the history of Smallville throughout comics over the past 70 years. But at the bottom of their Wikipedia page, there's a link to Hutchinson, Kansas's Wikipedia page, which correlates with people wanting to know about Smallville. They're going to click on that and go see what Hutchinson has to do with it. The idea is based on that page, which describes Smallville as a classic middle American town with Norman Rockwell-esque features. In the center of the town, near City Hall, there's a park and a gazebo that is a popular gathering place for the community. Now, the idea of renaming this isn't to recognize a fictional place or hero. It is to recognize the city that became Smallville because of those features. We would not be nationally recognized as Smallville if that park did not exist. This is crazy to me. 7 years ago next month, I started the campaign in that park. I can't believe it's been that long. It was where the first promotion occurred and where we started working together with Third Thursday to coordinate different events. In 2013, we had 3 or 4 events combined with Third Thursday at the park. And obviously that was when we launched the campaign in full and got the actual proclamation that year. And then in 2014, building on all the relationships that came from the previous 2 years, I was able to do the first Smallville Festival at the park. And that was one of the greatest weekends of my life. I got a chance to do what one of my heroes did and raise some money for local charities just by asking people for small donations or cans of food, which we all sent to the food bank here in Reno County. We also were able to honor local first responders, local heroes, through art and music, community. It was a great 4 days in Hutchinson. I offered anyone that brought a donation one of these bracelets. That week, that 4 days, I gave out almost 1,000 of them. So that shows how many people came out to support the cause and give back to the community. Smallville isn't just a fictional town. Our campaign would have never happened if not for the park or the city itself. We call Hutchinson Smallville because it is a reflection of the community that already exists. It's a name that makes me think of the people that work together to achieve great things. A town that I've found to be full of real heroes fighting for their own causes, and a place that can bring people of all ages and walks of life together. It's not just a name, it has a meaning, and it is a symbol of what kind of people make this city great. And when I mention symbols, I'm sure you've seen in the proposal, I'm sure they didn't notice it when they built the park, but I sure did when we started having the festival there. There are 118 sections of sidewalk in that park that are shaped like this, which I think is just kind of unique. But I also kind of feel like that park was built with a destiny in mind, a term used in the comics a lot, but we've actually used that park to further the cause and watch Smallville grow. This park is definitely a landmark to the city. It's also a landmark to Smallville, Kansas. 7 years ago, when we created the page on Facebook to check into Smallville, we chose that location as the address. So over the years, thousands and thousands of people have checked into Smallville, Kansas. They're checking into Avenue A Park. Just by complete chance, we picked that location. Renaming the park to Smallville Park would create a year-round attraction and landmark that honors the community and draws more tourists downtown. We have quite a bit of support on the block from business owners, including Lloyd Armstrong, Mark Buckley at the Toy Depot, and a big supporter is Melinda Jarrett at Sugar Time Confections right there on the corner of A and Main. I know she's also excited because her backside of that building is getting a new mural here in the next month, which I might add will have a little Smallville nod in it. I've seen the design. I had nothing to do with it. That wasn't me. But she's very excited about the potential change because I think she sees the economic impact that it could have on her business as well as other people downtown. We have supporters in the petition, which we included it with the proposal, both local, nationwide, past visitors that have been here and seen the other tourist attractions here in town that tie into the Smallville theme. And I'm sure you're all aware of the economic impact that that weekend does have on our city. It really does bring in a lot of tourism dollars. Also in the petition, we have supporters that include comic writers, comic artists, and the last name you'll see on there is the actor that actually played Baby Clark Kent in the original Superman movie, which I thought was really cool to get on there. He's a big supporter of Smallville and Comic-Con and everything we do here, and can't wait to come back. So we have, support from actual guy that crashed in Smallville, which I think is pretty cool. I believe that in the proposal, I've tried to cover all the criteria for renaming a park. I felt like 5 years ago we didn't have that history established, and at this point, after 7 years, we have a lot more to build on. And based on that, I believe that Avenue A Park, it is a fantastic park. Obviously, I show in the proposal there's some needs for upgrades or restorations in some areas. But I believe it deserves a name with meaning, a name that invites curiosity, more community gatherings, more tourism, something that can be a year-round landmark for the Smallville cause, and hopefully bring in more money to the community. As the only, maybe one or two parks in town without a meaningful name, myself and many believe that after more than 2 decades, this park deserves a name that reflects the heroism in the community, the compassion from everyone that works together to make downtown events great, the spirit of the community, hope to inspire future generations, and of course our unique claim to being the only Smallville, Kansas there is. So that's my proposal. I'm sure you've had a chance to look over some of that, and I want to thank you for listening and considering it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I'll start with thank you for reaching out. I know you're not a huge fan of public speaking, but I think you do a great job every time you're out there.
I'm
So
getting used to it.
maybe it'll suit you. It'll grow on you. So, anyways, so thank you for that. I think one of the things as I became aware of this, one, it was put on the agenda, but then two, people started reaching out. There's a lot of people that do think that there should be some name associated with it, albeit I did have a few folks that are enamored with the Avenue A name and would prefer it to stay there, that there's a meaning, an association with Avenue A that the folks that live and grew up around there identify with as well. But I think we would be remiss if we didn't take an opportunity to see what some other people might consider
Absolutely.
for naming it, or whatever, in listening to what I heard others say. Does anybody have any questions or commentary for Chris while we have him up here? If not, I might invite some others to.
I might not be back for a while, so here's your chance.
Here's your chance. Glutton for
Not so
punishment.
much to Chris, but again, my commendations to you for the passion that you have for this and your continued
Thank you.
commitment to that. So it's terrific,
Well,
Chris.
it's never going to stop. I'm
Yeah.
kind of obsessed with it.
John, a question to you in terms of when the park was developed, and explain that process in terms of how Avenue A Park was named, what it is today, how that
Well,
process works.
I'm not sure there was a process.
question I was having, yeah.
Linda did some research and thinking there would be something back in that time that would lead to that name, and we found really nothing other than, it's kind of like I compare it to like 43rd Park. You know, we use that name for grants and just as a start of it until I got a name, and that was similar to the Avenue A Park. I think it was just geographically
stuck.
Avenue A, and it just stuck, and there was no
I get you.
there was no formal process. There was no creative thinking to come up with Avenue A Park. It just was, that was the location.
I see.
And I think it, you know, as the mayor said, it kind of sticks in people's minds geographically. When you say Avenue A Park, everybody knows.
where it
So,
is. Yeah.
so yeah, but we did do some research back into when that project was developed, the grant funds and just all the engineering, and there was no formal discussion of the name.
Okay.
Not the same process was done with Orchard Park.
Well, no,
was a
Orchard Park, you
completely-
recall,
it was a completely different
we did
process.
a, you know, we,
Public input.
again,
Yeah,
it
we
was
did very
43rd Park
extensive.
for a while.
Yeah.
And had we not come up with one, it'd probably still be called 43rd Park.
Okay.
But, you know, we did that process. The Hutch News helped us with that, and I believe we had, 50 to 60 names that were submitted. If you recall, one of them that sticks for me that was really good was Spend My Tax Dollars Park was one that was submitted. I thought that
Yeah.
one didn't quite make it to the top.
That one
but-
didn't make the cut.
But we did have, like I said, there was 50 to 60 names that were submitted, and I would say 80% of them were serious, name
Yeah.
proposals. So anyway, that was that process, and
Okay.
it seemed to work pretty well. And what we came up with, I think, kind of rose to the top pretty quickly, mainly because of the history of that piece of property, as the orchard and Rivers Banks and the apple orchard. So that was a little easier probably because of that piece. So
John, could you maybe answer a question for me?
yes.
In the proposal, I lined out the boundaries of Avenue A Park. Now, I kind of consider the whole thing Avenue A Park, including the eastern side of it, which many people dub Grasshopper Park.
Right.
I left that alone, not realizing that a week later, after I submit the proposal, I'm going to hear about other people that want to rename parks. So I left that open intentionally with the idea of this could be a community thing that can work together. Maybe we get 2 renames, but that was just a thought I had.
Yeah,
'Cause
you're
I
right.
didn't know if that was considered all Avenue A Park.
Well, I think originally that's what we all talked about. I think Grasshopper Park again, I think just become that name because
Because of
there's
the
a
grasshopper.
statue. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was there was no formal process or anything like that. So, I mean, you could look at that separately.
When was that park actually put together?
97?
97.
97.
Thanks.
Okay.
Was it late 90s? Was it that? Okay.
I was in high school, late 90s.
Yeah, okay. What was after the, was it a furniture store?
Right.
Located on that corner,
Well,
burnt down.
Burned, yeah.
Yeah.
and it really evolved out of a project that was having to replace some bridges there.
Bridges, yeah.
Yeah.
And the bridges,
And
okay.
as opposed, and we got a similar conversation going on with, with Woody Seed, as opposed to just going back and replacing bridges. There was some pretty creative thought thinking through the public works director and city manager at that time, and others, I'm sure. Well, let's look at other alternatives, thus the Avenue A Park came about.
Development. Well, as the mayor had commented on, likewise, several contacts from folks liking Avenue A as a name to be kept or having other thoughts. I think there may be some folks that want to speak today, and I look forward to hearing those comments if
if desired. But I think regardless the support or lack thereof of Smallville as a name, I think that we ought to consider and pursue offering a broad opportunity for the community to comment, yay, nay, or whatever, if we're going to officially make a name change. And I think to stay in line as best we can with a policy that I know that we thought about and revised not too long ago, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, as I recall. So anyway, my thoughts on that regards.
I'd just quickly add, you've probably all heard of Metropolis, Illinois, the home of Superman. They're getting ready to celebrate their 41st year officially. And they're much like us. They started very, very small. It started with a guy in his garage with a museum. And now they have a Superman museum and a Superman statue. That's really their only two tourist attractions in a town of 4,000 people. And hundreds of people stopping there every day just to take pictures or whatever. So, with that in mind, that's kind of where I was going with this, to get us on a path to where we can find a year-round way to bring those people into town and they spend their money here. So
Appreciate that.
Is that the legal official name of the city, or is it?
Yes, it was actually originally named that, and they actually went through almost a 10-year legal battle to actually use it specifically for Superman until they got permission. But sometime in the 70s, they started a celebration much like our festival, and it keeps growing every year.
Yeah.
Very good.
It's really good for their tiny, tiny community.
Yeah.
Yeah, there it is.
Well, Chris, again, you've done so much work toward this and other endeavors that have really, you've just really made your mark, and look forward to continuing to see that festival grow. But yeah, I would agree that I've been contacted on a lot of different sides and would love to have a broader public input on this. Not that your idea doesn't have merit. It's a great idea. You've put a lot of work into it. You never come here with a half-hearted attempt at anything, and that's really inspiring to see. But
kind of going back to this shirt, I would hope to spark a conversation here today.
yeah,
So
absolutely. And
Well,
I think you
have.
I think you definitely have.
And I think that's probably, regardless how it ends up, I think that's the most impactful part of your going through the process and making the request for the name change. That will spark a community conversation, and whether or not there's a change, that hopefully then a commitment and a support of whatever it comes to be, and a conscious one, rather than maybe the accidental or type of naming kind of thing.
Very good. Thank you,
Thank you.
for coming out. I think I would like to, I'll put out that it appears, based on what I'm getting from the rest of the council here, that we're not going to make any decisions on this per se, but I would entertain if anybody else had another idea. I know that there were some floated about. If somebody wants to speak to that, again, not in great detail, because we're not going to be pulling any triggers today or anything, but just to give us a little opportunity for some additional food for thought. Jesse, could you announce yourself? Thank you. I can pass or oops, I guess I need to send some this way. Okay, those back up, put them all one way.
Okay.
Jesse Juma, 2708 Westminster Drive. I'm in an interesting position here because it's no secret, you guys know I'm a big supporter of all things Smallville and Batman, Superman, and I applaud the council because you all have donned a superhero t-shirt in the past before and everything, so we know you guys are great supporters of that cause. Good. And I'm in support of a place being named, park being named after Smallville, I think it's a great ideal, of course. One thing I remember in the Superman mythos, whatever you want to call it, is that there's a quote that Superman says in the movie, one of the later movies, that he says, you know, when the military is asking, you know, when they first meet Superman, not first, but during his first coming presence to the world, how do we know we can trust you, you know, and how do we know you're a good guy and all that kind of stuff? And Superman says, I'm from Kansas. It's about as American as it gets.
There you go.
And that's the one quote that I always remember, because that's what this, playing off the Smallville theme where Superman is from, that's what this is all about. It's about using that international icon to use it to write the coattails, to promote Hutchinson, you know, to bring tourists into town. I mean, you know, the potential there. We've had 5,000 people come down to the comic convention already, and that just continues to grow every year. So the potential to bring tens of thousands of people to Hutchinson, Kansas in the future is still very, you know, relevant and still ongoing and still, I think, a viable cause. So to name a park after Smallville so that people have a, you know, the city does recognize Smallville, Hutchinson as Smallville every year during the convention and the festival. And let's get back to scratch, you know, the Smallville Festival, which is under the auspice of Hutch Rec Commission now, and the Smallville Convention, which is under John Robinson, are two different entities, but we coordinate together during that 4-day weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, to work together, you know, to bring that Smallville weekend, so to say. So, yes, great potential still from, you know, it's actually, you know, it's a big marketing thing, you know, to bring people, tourists, people to Hutchinson. So, do I think Avenue A Park would make a great place for a Smallville park? Yes, it is a great place. A nice big green space. It gets visibility. That would be nice. That would be my Batman side, talking about support of that park being named after Smallville. If I was Bruce Wayne, I would come back to you today because of this gentleman. We, a group of Hutch and Harmony and the NAACP, Mr. Darrell Pope, have been talking about honoring Mr. Chester I. Lewis. I gave you guys a little flyer there. I think I handed it out to some others. But just to give you a little recap, Chester I. Lewis was born in Hutchinson, Kansas. He was the president of the Wichita chapter of the NAACP. He helped to segregate restaurants, swimming pools, aircraft companies, local government agencies. He lobbied for a fair housing ordinance. He mentored and counseled black students. He helped reform the NAACP to take a more legal and legislative actions. He was an attorney. He does have a park recognizing him. He does have a school named after him in Wichita, Kansas. But he's from Hutchinson. Born and raised here in Hutchinson. And so this entity, the Hutch and Harmony and the NAACP, and of course supporters in the community, have always wanted to find a place to recognize Mr. Lewis. And that recognition of Mr. Lewis, it also brings to forefront to remind the residents in the community, you know, that diversity still exists, you know, in this town, and it just helps to bring up the conversation still, and to realize who the champion was, who the real hero is. And I'm not downplaying Superman, the comic figure, but now we're talking about what we stand for in the Smallville group. We stand about recognizing heroes, you know, local hometown heroes and stuff. And this is what it is when it comes to Chester Lewis. So the reason why this is interesting is because when Chris, which again I support, I'm there. When Chris and I have talked about this, because we haven't exactly decided yet which would be a nice place to recognize and honor Chester Lewis. And of course, when you think about parks and big green spaces, you know, when we think about parks, we think about big green space, and Avenue A fits that model. So, of course, so now we were looking at, yes, we would like to see Avenue A Park named after Chester Lewis. And that's what brings us up when this window opened now to, you know, when Chris brought his agenda up. So that's kind of like where we're at now. We have two entities that would like to name the same park. I'm going to throw something out there, which we haven't decided yet, also too, which is why we're, in the end, we're probably just asking to put this on hold. There is a pocket park popping up next to Hutch Rec Commission, right across the street from the Fox. You guys, well, Justin was up here giving that presentation a couple of weeks ago. So you saw what the development is going to be there. And at that time, Justin had mentioned that there wasn't a name for that project either yet also too. We actually had a chance to, and so there is a Chester Lewis Reflection Park in Wichita, Kansas, that just happens to be a pocket park downtown on Douglas Street. So it is kind of similar to the pocket park that is being built here.
I can attest to that. I saw it. I was there last week on Douglas.
Mhm.
It's a beautiful park, a lot of water features, a lot of statues. It's a very, very nice park. Yeah.
So when people think of park, you know, you guys had discussed this earlier, you think of green space. And when we think of, when we're thinking of a park named after Chester Lewis, obviously it would be nice. We thought about big green space such as Avenue A and stuff. And, and he grew up near the neighborhood and stuff, you know, so that's another proximity kind of thing. But we have, so even we are undecided within our own group. And we have a chance to talk to Mr. Lewis's daughter last night and asked her opinion. If we were to honor your father with the name of a park, would you prefer this big green space park like Avenue A? Or, you know, do you think you would like that little pocket park to named after him? And she really didn't have any preference. She's familiar with the pocket park, and, you know, obviously in Wichita, so she, you know, understands what that concept theme means. She's just happy and honored herself that we're even considering, you know, honoring her father. So there really hasn't been, and then of course, and I'm kind of like, this is interesting because we're kind of like, what if and you know, but nor here, because no decisions have been made yet. We're not sure what Justin and Tony have in plan for is actually naming that that pocket park also too. We've thrown it up to them, you know, mentioned it to them, you know, but like I said, no decisions have been made. But I guess we're just here trying to leave that option open still to, you know, maybe we're not ready to make a decision yet on the actual naming of Smallville Park, because we'd like to leave that option open still, because it could possibly be one of the options to honor Chester Lewis, or another option could be the pocket park. That's kind of like where I'm at. Just to give you my own little thing about the pocket park, I kind of, you know, obviously, I think the majority of people from the neighborhood, you know, and I'm one of the guys from the neighborhood, and I get it. I don't know. I'm on the fence. I don't know which park to go. I mean, it didn't bother me either way. But so, you know, but because I think the folks from the old school, from the folks would like to see, they perceive the big green space park as the park, which is cool. You know, I like that too, and we understand that. Okay, so me maybe being another generation, I see the pocket park as, my deal was that it's going to be more concentrated. So my deal that I presented to them was, I think it's going to get more traffic actually than Avenue A Park eventually when they build that pocket park, because the Hutch Rec Commission will run some programs there. It's going to be lit up, and I mean by Wi-Fi. It's going to be lit up by lighting. It's going to be lit up by electricity. There's going to be a little staging area there. There's you know, you saw the three spaces on the wall, where one of them could be a perfect mural of Chester Lewis, and explaining who he meant and who he was. It's concentrated, so, and I think there's going to get traffic from people going back and forth between the parking lot and the Fox Theater. It's, once it's up and going, the people from the Wiley Building, I think, will come down and utilize it. And I think it's just going to be a great space to meet for lunch when, downtown area. It's just, I think it's going to be a good little meeting spot. And I think it's, so on a daily basis, so to say, I think it's going to get more traffic than somebody driving across Avenue A Park. And then the events that are held there periodically, So I think actually that little pocket park's going to get more traffic. So I think it will give Chester Lewis's name like more recognition, I think in the long run, because of the traffic that may go through there.
I think your comments illustrate where we're kind of headed, which is exactly that I think we need more input from individuals, because both causes seem worthy of recognition. And I know some might put one over the other for obvious reasons. It sounds like there's more than a couple opportunities, even within Avenue A Park itself. Grasshopper Park versus the other side, and things like that. So I think what I would suggest is maybe we can commission something direct or leaning towards how we came about Rivers Bank Orchard Park. I don't remember that having a bad process. I thought that people walked away with a good feel that they were represented, they were allowed to air their vote, so to speak, and things like that. Maybe that's not the way we go, but but along that lines. I guess I would also ask, what other parks we have that, that are in the works or whatever, that maybe don't have names yet, that are in the future. I know we just had the Green Play folks come out and things like that, so I don't know if there's something that we could look at there as well. Because I don't believe, again, I'm being presumptuous, but I'm assuming that we're not going to make a decision on this today. But you illustrate again that there needs to have more conversation. I liken it somewhat to the flag, and the way that was handled. I like the flag. I like where we ended up. But there were those in the community that felt there should have been more representation. I think we need to have hear from more people, more voices, and we'll figure out a way to get that done. Mr. Pope, though, I didn't want to cut you off. If you want to add something to it, please do.
No, Darrell Pope, 16 East 2nd here in Hutchinson. I just wanted to say that I was interested in promoting a considerable consideration as well, because although I learned the impact of Smallville today and what it has for Hutchinson, I learned more about it today than I ever knew about it before. But I'm saying that I felt like that Chet Lewis, who was I knew the family growing up as a youngster, and he has a commitment to civil rights and social justice, and he actually did some things that made actually change and gave a quality of life to people that were ignored. And so I think that he needs to be recognized, and I think that that that's something we have to consider. And and I'm not trying to be facetious or anything, but I think we need to consider sometimes a real person over somebody that's fictitious. And he actually did a whole lot of things that made gave the people an opportunity to be treated as first-class citizens. And to me, that carries a lot of impact and is very important. And I think he deserves recognition in a town that he was born and raised and lived in.
Very good. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Yeah.
With that being said, then.
Might there be somebody else who wants to speak?
Oh, and I thank you, Steve, for pointing that out. If there is anybody else who wants to speak to the item in some form or fashion, feel free to approach. Not at this moment, but thank you for catching that. I assume we could just table this then and have further discussion, or?
Well, I'd like to maybe come up with a motion that talks about directing staff to.
Do we need a motion to do that?
Well, I think just basically to start the process.
Starting the process of seeking input and whatnot, yeah.
And we can do that through various avenues. Hutch News can help us, other media outlets, we can do it through social media. And I think basically just having one, centerpiece where all the suggestions come before, and then we, complete those and bring them to you all for consideration and give it some time. I mean, doesn't have to happen next week.
And I might be misremembering, but I thought that was a fine process. If somebody has a better idea, then I'll listen to that as well. But that's where I was suggesting we maybe head.
So we can have Rebecca help us
I was just
put
thinking
that
Rebecca
process
can
together.
do a survey.
Poor Rebecca gets more on her plate.
I am pleased to hear that there's a movement to recognize Chester Lewis. I think that's a part of our history that a lot of people from Hutchinson didn't even know about. And when you learn about Chester Lewis, the impact he had on the civil rights movement didn't just affect our little part of the world. It affected the country as a whole. So just, it's easy to forget history if an effort isn't made to greater educate people. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about both proposals. I do hope we find a way to honor Chester Lewis in some way if it's not with the naming of this, but I'm on board with doing a broader input process. So.
And I don't know how that goes about with the various, again, Avenue A being split into two parks, potentially one side of the road, the other, and then the last piece being the pocket park.
Yeah.
That yet has.
I mean, honestly, we can kind of do what we want, Dave.
Right.
This is
Yeah.
true. This is true. There's a fine line between, by committee or just making a decision too. So.
No, but I mean, I definitely want more input. I mean, but if we wanted to name one side one thing and one side the other, who's to say we can't do that?
Sure.
So.
So we will put together a process, and I will present that to you, but
Okay.
I don't know that we need to come back for a formal approval of the process. That's up to you all, or we can get the process started.
I'd like to get the process
I'd like to get the
Yeah.
process started
Yeah.
as well.
Get it
Okay.
going.
I think Dave
But-
referenced the Orchard
but-
Park, and I think that, I agree, I think that was a
Yeah.
I thought it was
a
well
very
received.
workable and
It worked.
inclusive and
Yeah.
broad process, so
Yeah.
something akin to that, I think would.
I think we'll get a lot of input, so. Okay, thank you.
Just a bit of humor, if I might. I was talking to my wife about it. My youngest child overheard me speaking, and she said, "Hey, Dad, do you think they'll name a park after you?" And I said, "I think there's something in the criteria that says you either have done something famous or maybe you even have to be dead." And my wife says that can be arranged. So I don't know how to take that. But anyways, on that note,
Yeah.
Do
I
we
hope
need
that
to-
is satisfactory. or
Do we
will.
need to make a motion to table?
I
No.
No.
don't
Okay.
think
Just
so,
move on.
no.
Just
We
table.
know, we've got our marching orders,
Good.
so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you. All right. With that being said, next item, if you would.
Item 8B, consider special alcohol fund awards for 2020.
Paul Brown, City Attorney. You can tell by looking at that memorandum that I did not write it.
It's too long.
It's way too long.
Yeah.
So thank you, Merrill, because that's the way her memos look. And we didn't make any changes from last year. And counsel, the significance of the memorandum is right in the first sentence, because that's the language from the statute about who should receive these liquor drink tax funds. Because it talks about whose principal purpose is alcoholism and drug abuse prevention and education, detoxification, intervention, or treatment of persons who are alcoholics or drug abusers or are in danger of becoming alcoholics or drug abusers. I've been on this committee ever since I've been city attorney. We try to distribute it between both children and youth and adults, and I can tell you from my personal viewpoint, we try to influence the children and youth in particular. If you keep them occupied with positive interaction and with mentors, we have a chance to steer them away from these types of problems. And then on the other end, you've got drug court, where you deal with some of the most intensive problems. So we look at those and support those, and it makes good sense to spend the funds in this manner. The amounts and the entities are no different from last year. It's Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Boys and Girls Club, Communities That Care, and the Reno County Drug Court. And we ask that you approve the staff recommendation on the agency awards.
Paul, are these the agencies that applied? Or
Yes.
There were no others
There were
besides
no
those
others.
four?
I do have a question on the school resource
Yeah,
officer. If we can get maybe a little bit of background update, I'm a little fuzzy on exactly what has transpired the last couple years in terms of the funding and the role of the city in the SRO program.
Well, in the memo, it says we don't recommend that because it doesn't meet the definition. But a lot of times those monies do get directed to the school resource officer. If you look at the definition, is that really what the school resource officer does? Not likely. But if you look at the accounting that's attached to it, there have been funds spent on that. So sometimes that happens.
So do we fund it in a different department?
SRO.
SRO?
Through the police department.
Through the police department.
In school district, yeah. It's a shared expense, but
Okay.
it's funded.
So we've not defunded it?
No.
No, it's not
Okay.
defunded.
No.
That's
There was some question. As you can see in the past there, where we funded some years out of that, and it was recommended by the committee that didn't necessarily meet the definition, and we agree, we understand that. So, but no, that program has not been defunded.
okay, good. That's
Because we just
need that
have,
for
we just have the
clarification.
one
Right.
at the high
Just
school,
have the one.
right? No
Yeah.
more at the elementary. Okay.
I think I make this comment every year, but I sure would like to see these monies going more to direct treatment. Unfortunately, those organizations aren't applying, or they're lacking in our community. I do know that there is a conversation community-wide among 3 different groups to try to establish either a detox facility or a long-term treatment facility, and I would hope that if, as a community, we're able to get that off the ground, that we would look at allocating the special alcohol funds to subsidize that facility. Just throwing that out there. But I know these organizations that do prevention work are incredible. I just wish we had more on the other side.
Yeah.
I take it the total amount allocated satisfies that percentage that's required, what, 1/3, if I remember correctly?
Yes, all of the funds come out of the 1/3.
Okay.
And we're meeting that. And so the allocation is basically to make sure that we expend the 1/3.
Yes.
Sort of along the line of Jade's comments, I take it that the list of, down at the bottom of the chart, agency funding requests is at least going back to 2015, it lists everybody who made applications. I'm wondering, do we or do we need, and I'm not so much thinking about altering what's being proposed for 2020, get the word out that there are funds, and if you are an entity that can meet this criteria, think about applying, if we do any advertising, so to speak, or promotion. Does anybody know? Or Paul, do you know?
We don't. I mean, the program's been around for a long time.
For some time.
And most of the agencies involved in that know of it. Some choose probably, I don't even know if some of those, the Substance Abuse Center of Kansas, if it's even around anymore.
It is.
It is.
It's right by
Yeah.
New Beginnings over there,
Yeah.
and I'm surprised that they haven't applied the last.
And
few
some
years.
of it is, just as somebody mentioned, just making the effort to apply.
Well, I wonder if some of those have had
there's
some
work.
change in administration as well.
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't pass the keys along, the outgoing didn't tell the incoming, oh, this is something you want to look at.
No,
Is the application lengthy? What's it like?
The
No,
application.
it's
No.
not lengthy, no.
Sandra's shaking her head saying it doesn't look like
We
it's real
can,
hard.
we can make an effort to notify all those maybe in the history that have received funds that's coming up, and.
I know
just
it's not a lot of money.
But
And that's really
Yeah.
it. That's really it. I mean, you can look to other organizations, you can spread it out. Eventually, your impact is diminished,
Yeah.
and it really isn't worth the time and effort to seek that grant. So there are limits. It's not a lot of money. And I think some of the folks have looked at that and said, we can apply for other grants where we can get greater amounts, and it's bigger bang for our buck. And so it is limited.
Yeah.
Sandra, you want to say something?
I know that
If you'll
Sandra
announce,
Boris.
thank you.
And my work address is 1520 North Plum. I know that SAC has applied for that in the past, and SAC is still around. And Harold is still the executive director out of Wichita. The Wichita is the one that has SAC, and I think he just chose because of the amount
Yeah.
not to do it. So
More trouble than it's
yeah.
worth.
So, but as far as since I do prevention, for every dollar you put in prevention, you save $22 in treatment. So prevention really makes sense in this. And opioid prevention is for every dollar in prevention, saves $68 in treatment, which is a huge piece. And so I know as a preventionist, that's important. So
Absolutely. But I also know that it's a lot easier to fundraise for prevention. It's a lot sexier. Like you can't, if you have a drug and alcohol treatment facility like SAC or Reno County Alcohol and Drug Services, not a lot of people are going to go to a fundraiser that they put on and, you know, in a
For
fancy
treatment.
dress and give a lot of money. So I just feel like their resources are more limited, but it's up to them to apply. And if it's not worth their time, then we're happy to support organizations that are doing great work. So.
And to you, Sandra, and to anybody else who's here, my raising it is not to diminish the value and the work that's done. I'm just, you know, if there are others out there that are doing some good work, and but certainly the 4 that applied are deserving and do a great job in our community, and I have no problem whatsoever supporting the recommendation.
And I think it takes
made.
all of us working together.
Absolutely.
That's
Across
valid.
the spectrum.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I'd move to approve the staff's recommendation agency awards from the Special Alcohol Program Fund for fiscal year 2020.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Daveline?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 8C, consider professional services agreement with Burns and McDonnell.
Good morning. My name is Brian Clennon. I'm the Director of Public Works.
Oh, yes. The gift that keeps on giving.
Exactly.
Taking, isn't it?
That's true.
The Obie Road Landfill Superfund site. Up on the screen is a map that shows this Superfund site. And just to orient everybody, north is up. This is the airport. You can see the runways there. The old landfill was located approximately right in this area. The monitoring wells that we have existing are have the red lettering underneath them. And then there's some domestic wells that we're also monitoring, and they've got the blue numbers under them.
And when you say domestic, they're privately owned then?
They are, yes.
Yeah, those are all houses people
That's right.
live in out
That's
there.
located just east
Yeah.
of the Superfund site. So pollution was discovered in 1985, and the remedial action that's been taken is 1, to keep people off of the site, 2, not to disturb the site, doing digging or things like that, and 3 is to monitor the groundwater for contaminants. And the monitoring program that's being required starting in 2018 going forward is to sample 13 monitoring wells and 6 domestic wells for arsenic on a yearly basis and for volatile organic compounds every 5 years. In 2018, 4 of the 13 monitoring wells had arsenic that exceeded the maximum contaminant level, and 1 of our 6 domestic wells that were sampled exceeded the MCL for arsenic. And for the property owner of that well, the city began providing bottled water for him until he was hooked up to the rural water district water line. So in 2019, we'll be monitoring for arsenic only. And with that, are there any questions about the Obie Road Superfund site?
Is positive progress being made?
Well,
Are we seeing any, or what are we seeing?
It's going to be there forever.
Really, all we're doing right now is trying to establish trends for arsenic. Is it migrating off the site or not? The arsenic that we're seeing, is it coming from the landfill or not? And right now, we don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
So it's going to be ongoing monitoring to see if that contamination, any contamination, is starting to show up in those domestic wells to the east.
Brian, do you see any benefit of considering a multi-year agreement with Burns McDonnell rather than an annual agreement?
Yeah, it would save, I guess, coming back here
Right.
every year, because
Yeah.
this is an
We
annual.
can't do it legally, can we?
Got cash basis problems.
Is it a cash basis issue? Is it really?
The future.
Oh,
Yeah,
well,
commit.
We could put it on the consent agenda. That would help.
Oh.
No, it's probably something that, because it is a,
yeah.
just, I mean, pricing changes with this company, and so and it's always probably good too, just to kind of remind people of, you know, the difficult situation we've got
Okay.
out there, we've had for years, and we're going to continue to have.
Trying to streamline it a little bit, but,
I appreciate
but we're limited,
that.
huh?
I appreciate that.
Sometimes you just can't, John.
Okay.
Hey, Brian, out of curiosity, can you tell me on that map where the new proposed daycare center is, the old OB school? I'm just curious.
Right. The old OB school should be located right here, just
Yeah.
to the east, right off of 4th Avenue. Yeah.
But that area isn't contaminated?
Well,
But they're on domestic.
they should
rural
be on
water
the rural
service.
water district
Oh, okay.
water line,
Got you.
not a domestic well.
Thank you.
You also said you're only going to be testing for arsenic going forward. Is that because you have a assumption that all the other contaminants are not
Well,
involved, or?
right, we'll be doing that on a yearly basis. The volatile organic compounds are sampled for every 5 years.
I see.
So we will continue to monitor for those
Of course. Okay,
as
that
well.
makes
Yeah.
sense. Perfect.
Yeah.
Any other questions of staff, or?
Okay.
Well, I would move to
One
approve
more-
the.
Oh, please.
I'd have one more.
Oh, do you?
section.
Okay, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Me and John are trying to streamline this
Yeah.
thing. Please.
All right, the Fourth and Cary site. Pollution was discovered in the early 1980s at a city well that was located at Fourth and Cary. In 1994, the city signed a consent agreement with KDHE to clean up that groundwater contamination. The companies responsible for the contamination paid the city $10.5 million to clean up the site. We also formed a TIF, a tax increment financing district out there. It was established between 1994 and 2014. That TIF district generated roughly $350,000 a year for that time period. And that money was used to help pay for the monitoring program that's ongoing, as well as the maintenance of the cleanup wells, the remediation wells that we have out there. We do have one source area that we are still trying to clean up, and that is located right in this area. You can see those two little yellow blobs.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the old Farmland J elevator.
Oh, okay.
And so later this year, I'll be bringing to you a contract to perform a pilot test project where we'll be evaluating, injecting 2 reagents into the saturation zone of that area, and that reagent is supposed to accelerate the remediation of this contaminant. So that is something that is coming later this year, a
Okay.
project that we'll implement in 2019 and it'll run through 2020. And once we get the results back from that pilot test, we'll have to do a full-scale implementation of the project once we have some more information back on which reagent worked best. And that project will probably happen in 2021.
What we're looking at in terms of the professional agreement, that it involves these sites as well?
What's before you right now is just monitoring of these sites.
Is the monitoring portion of it, right? Okay.
And later this summer, I'll be bringing to you a contract for the test plan and the implementation of that. We also have an area of deep groundwater contamination that's located right here, which comes from the former Garvey elevator site. And the treatment for that is essentially just to pump that groundwater to the RO treatment plant for cleanup. And that's what we're doing, and we'll continue to do that.
To borrow off Steve's question earlier, are we seeing progress in these sites?
Well, we have, and you can see, it's hard to see with all the lines, but this is
That's the original plume?
right.
Okay.
And we also had a plume right here from the Bungie elevator, which has pretty well been cleaned up.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so there has been some progress, but you can't see the numbers, but there's still some pretty elevated numbers in here that it's going to take a while to clean up. Again, KDHE is requiring that a semi-annual and an annual groundwater monitoring report be completed every year. And this is basically ensuring that the remedial activities are containing the pollution and also removing the pollution. So,
I'm going to raise a hypothetical question that we've talked about before, but go up there on that plume
Right
up there by the
right up here.
elevator there. And I guess my question is that in and around that area, there are some existing industrial, commercial type buildings. And my question is, perhaps you can explain, or maybe Paul can explain, if XYZ company is interested in buying a particular building that has a history of some environmental issues, that sometimes prospective buyers become nervous about their liability in terms of the previous history.
Right.
But there's a certificate of release process that the city has exercised before. Can you take a moment to explain how that process works, if you
It's been a
would?
while since I've done it. We've
I know
only
it.
done a couple since I've been here. But basically, when the 4th and Cary District was established, you had the private companies who made their contributions to the project, and then you had the city of Hutchinson, who basically is accountable to KDHE for taking care of this. And we continue to do so, and that absolved them of further liability, and it absolves future property owners of liability, and they do get a release from us if it's within the established area. And we have all those.
Right.
And we're able to research those. They've been scanned so they can never disappear. And it allows them to go ahead and continue. We had, the most recent one was on
CHS?
Yeah,
CHS.
the CHS
Okay.
property, so that they can continue on without having to worry about past liability for environmental issues.
And the city doesn't accept any liability, of course, by
Well, we are
removing-
responsible
Well,
for the
cleaning
cleanup.
it up.
For the
Of course,
cleanup.
of course,
Cleanup.
but yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
you would be.
these contracts and this work, it is our responsibility. We have a contract with KDHE that continues until it's all
Until it's
wrapped up.
done, yeah.
Tell me you're all day.
And we've exhausted, those that caused the pollution have been made, or they've done their part.
They paid.
Paid.
They
They paid.
Just trying to find a way
They
around it.
paid.
Okay. so
And
they're-
it
they're
was
out there.
significant dollars at the time that they paid.
Sure.
Yeah. Problem is it just keeps going.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
outlives that.
It-
Because the alternative at the time was, this was going to be an EPA Superfund site. And absent the cooperation of those private businesses in the city of Hutchinson and KDHE, that's what it would have become. And it'd been far more expensive and far more complex.
Yeah, and that would have really impacted the tax base.
Oh, the tax base,
Yeah.
huge
And the
Yes.
tax
property
base
value, which
impact,
would have
yeah, negatively.
impacted the city, the school district, the county,
On and on.
and our
Yeah.
ability to
And there was a time where we funded these expenses out of that TIF district. That
Right.
You remember that, I don't remember what the annual TIF payment was.
about 300.
About 350,000, yeah.
And we've exhausted that, and you recall, we tried to renew that TIF, Jade will remember this, a few years ago. I don't know, how long was that?
Remember that?
Back in
Yeah,
2014.
2014.
Yep,
Yeah.
I
And we
remember
were
that.
unable to
School
do
district.
that.
School
So
district didn't want
now these expenses are responsibility of the water fees, water fund.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and with that, we do have a proposed agreement with Burns and McDonnell for professional environmental services in the contract amount of $93,937,000. We'd recommend that the council authorize the mayor to sign the attached agreement.
Is there a motion?
Well, I'll move to approve the professional engineering services agreement for 2019 OB Road landfill subsite and 4th and Cary site in the amount of $93,937 and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Moved and seconded, please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave-Line?
Yes?
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 8D, consider job creation incentive policy.
Mayor, Council, before you is the policy that we discussed a couple weeks ago. You recall, we had quite a bit of discussion on the issue of retention, job retention, and as it relates to this policy. And so basically, I've put this policy back before you with some amendments there, proposed amendments, if you will, that essentially speak to retention. you know, at the end of the day, if you go back to number 4 there, where it says in red there, the city will consider approval of incentives for job creation, which includes new jobs or retention of jobs with an expansion component. So essentially, all that's saying is that you've got to have new jobs created to qualify. And so, you know, the word retention adds something there, but it doesn't specifically say that just retaining existing jobs qualifies under this policy. So you recall at the last meeting, we had, you know, some interest from the council to approve the policy as it was originally presented. We had some interested in having ward retention with an expansion component. And so we, you know, had difference of opinions there. So back before you today to see kind of if any of this would move any of you off your positions as to where you were. So.
Thank you, John.
Yep.
And yeah, I know we've all had a chance to read the revised one, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that the original version was out there now that we've had another couple weeks to look at it as well. And I would entertain some conversation to what we have before us today, if anybody wants to lead off. And I might myself take that opportunity. With regards to the revision, including the expansion component, that is something that I had mentioned. I think others had echoed. Some had anyways. I like the idea, and that could be adding jobs. That could be adding facilities. It could be actual real property or expansion to their footprint or whatever it is. If we do end up going towards the revised version, I'm glad that that component is included.
Well, as we had a good discussion here a couple of weeks ago and so on, I could sense from the council that there was some reluctance in including in some way this notion of job retention. So thus that was part of my thinking in terms of going back to the basic purpose as kind of a framework of trying to establish a intent of the city of Hutchinson as it relates to business recruitment, business retention, and business expansion, with no binding direction other than it conveys an expression of our support for recruitment, retention, and expansion. And that's really all I was after, is just really to make sure it's as inclusive as possible. And hopefully that additional language, along with the amendments or additions to number 4, will meet the intent of the inclusion of job retention, business retention in the policy.
Actually, physically, the verbiage retention
The verbiage
is
retention. That's all I was striving for.
Clarification for me, Mr. City Manager. Retention only would not meet this policy.
Correct, the way it's written.
Right. There would have to be job
and expansion.
increases, expansion, growth, whatever word you'd use, additional jobs added in some fashion. Okay.
And that was my biggest point of contention was, and I think I mentioned that in the last one, I'll bring it up again, I didn't want to, I see it oftentimes in my own business where I get leveraged against another party, and I didn't want to see somebody take advantage. Well, I might have this opportunity in Columbus, Ohio, but if you're willing to pony up, I might stay. And I didn't. I think by adding the other element to it, the growth piece, either jobs or expansion within their business, it puts some skin in the game on their end as well, if we're going to do that. The other thing I was going to add too, for the same reasons I didn't feel that it was necessary to include the verbiage in there, I think it was number 11. I think the verbiage being in there, if I truly feel that number 11 gives us an out, if you will, or an opportunity to look at individual ones and not be beholden to the rule. For the same reasons I felt it wasn't necessary to have it in there, I'm not too concerned about it being in there because we could deviate if necessary, if we felt that it was necessary. That's how I arrived.
I feel like it's sufficiently flexible while providing direction. So thanks, John, for going back and doing some more work on it.
You bet. No problem.
Any other questions of staff? More further discussion, Steve?
Oh, just comment. I was okay with the original policy, and I'm okay with this one, either any one part or several parts of it. it doesn't change that we're supporting job growth
Correct.
as the basis for this incentive policy. So anyway,
Is there a motion then, or further discussion?
Well, I would move to approve the job creation and incentive policy as originally drafted with the additional language added to the purpose statement.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Just a
please,
clarification.
clarification.
Please.
On number 4, there was an amendment there too.
Oh.
I just want to make sure
So,
we're
yeah, there's
It's including number 4.
including any of the amendments that proposed.
and there's
here.
also an addition of language in 8.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure we're clear on
Oh,
that.
that is specific to the purpose statement
The purpose
alone.
statement,
Okay.
right.
All right.
So-
Would you be interested in
Yeah.
amending your motion, John?
Yes, amended
I'm not
as
proposing you
read.
do, but I just wanted to make
Yeah.
sure that,
We're all talking about the same thing.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Good
Yeah,
catch.
I think we are.
Okay, so the motion then should read something to the effect of the additional language added to the purpose statement, the additional verbiage in item 4, item 8.
Well, just how about the job creation policy
As-
as revised, period?
I like it. I like it easy.
Yeah.
Be fine.
Do you want to amend your motion to that?
Yes, right, I would amend it
To that, okay.
to that effect.
The second stand.
Poor Linda.
Nope, you're good.
Right.
Okay, it's been moved.
Second,
Stand by the
yeah.
second. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. All right, next item, if you would.
Item 9, report of city officials.
Nancy, I'm going to look towards you.
Nothing.
John?
No, I have nothing.
Steve?
Just a question, where's our current artwork from?
Oh.
Jim Heck.
Oh.
Look
great.
back there, make sure I'm right.
Yes.
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so I mean, it's good to see that,
Yeah.
at least it
Yeah.
looks different to me.
Right, yeah.
Sometimes I
I'm
can
glad you mentioned that. Yeah.
not
Yeah, refreshes
notice,
you.
and I noticed, and I wanted to ask. So, good, I'm glad we're still doing that. I guess my question was meant to draw some attention and for the public to, hey, we've got some displayed artwork that folks could come in and see.
For sale.
By
That's it.
local artist.
Jake?
I have nothing, thank you.
I'll just reiterate how we started the meeting. It is Bike Month, and Bike to Work Day is coming up. As much as I encourage the motorists to look out for the cyclists, I encourage the cyclists to have good behavior as well. Know where you're supposed to be and do all that. I think a lot of the confrontations and things come from unexpected people on sidewalks or places where sometimes you wouldn't anticipate seeing a cycle. So we as cyclists should exercise good behaviors as well and ultimately share the road.
If I may tag on that, one of my peeves, and maybe I need to ask the chief, cyclists are to be on the right side of the road, am I correct? I'll tell you, I get, nothing more scares me at being an automobile driver than I have a bicyclist coming down their left side of the road, and sometimes they all of a sudden appear in front of me, and I'm thinking, oh my Lord.
Please.
Cyclists are required to follow the same traffic laws as a motor vehicle. So they are supposed to be on the right side of the road. However, they are also allowed to take up a traffic lane, just like a vehicle.
Just like a vehicle.
Yes,
They don't
yes.
have to hug the curb or the whatever.
Oh, really?
Yes. And generally speaking, the law reads that they're supposed to ride as far to the right of the traffic lane as possible, but they are allowed to ride in the traffic lane. Vehicles are required to give cyclists 3 feet of clearance when they pass, and they're supposed to pass to the left.
And I think I know they're not allowed in the downtown on the sidewalks. That is by ordinance. But I think that it's encouraged that they're not on the sidewalks again because of the breaks in the streets and the drive-throughs and all that stuff. But I think if there's an alternate path, like a bike path or whatever, then they're encouraged to take that over the road or something.
Encouraged
like
but not required.
But not required, yes. I often, for my own sake, I'll ride as far to the right as humanly possible until the traffic signal turns. Then I will take my lane, because what happens is you'll be on the right-hand side of a car turning right, and that's not a good place to be.
No,
and
it's
so
not.
I'll take my lane. I get a toot of the horn every once in a while,
So-
but as soon as traffic proceeds, I immediately get right back over to the right.
Friendly
Tips and
gesture.
tricks for the mayor.
There it is. Yeah, how not to get called some names.
Thank you, Chief.
Chief, very much. But yes, so exercise safety, be aware of your surroundings, both cyclists and motorists. Thank you. Mr. Manager.
A couple of quick things. Just a reminder of our study session on Thursday, 8 a.m. We're going to review the IMS pavement study, talk about our code mitigation policy that we talked about during our budget retreat, and then kind of revisit our Orchard Park Pavilion discussion. And some of that information will
What was
just
the
be
first
presented.
item you mentioned, John?
I'm sorry.
The pavement.
Pavements?
Pavement management.
Okay.
The
pavement
people,
side.
the people.
So is that going to be here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. And then secondly, wanted to talk a little bit about the Woody Seat project. We've had a recent development there. Last week, Jeff Peterson and I had a conference call with WSP, who's the company that prepared our TEEP study. And you all have a copy of that. You haven't read it yet, but and they also did the Washington Street Boulevard project. But they talked to us about the possibility of applying for a build grant for this project. And so I want to talk a little bit about that because there is some cost involved and some timing issues. The build grant is the formerly the Tiger grant that you remember we applied for, got through Amtrak and all that. But the build grant apparently now is focused more on rural America. And so there's $900 million available across the country. And basically it's 50% urban and 50% rural projects. The cost share is 80% max, so they would fund up to 80% of a project. And eligible projects would be like highways, bridges, public transportation, rail, pretty much a lot of the same things that were in the Tiger grant, except it's more focused on rural. Unfortunately, there's an application deadline July 15th of this year, and it will require outside help to prepare that application, and we've talked a little bit to WSP about that. Last year, there were 6 grants applications from Kansas. 2 of those were funded. One of those was Hayes, Kansas. The other one was Wyandotte County. Hayes's project, I don't remember the street. Steve, you may remember.
Vine
but-
Street.
Vine, yeah. It was
Highway 183.
yeah, it was
Vine.
a $7.2 million, $3 million project, and they received $6 million in funding
wow.
for that.
Yeah.
Now I think it's grown to about a $9 million project. And then Wyandotte County received $13.8 million. So with that being said, is the question, are we interested in going after that money? You know, we listened to the consultants talk to us about, they think this project meets a lot of the criteria. There's a new criterion there, the opportunity zones, if it's in that. This project happens to be in one of those, so you know what that really means. But just to give you an idea of the cost, Hayes spent $42,000 for their application. We got an estimate from them yesterday, I think, right at that number. And I contacted the city manager in Hayes this morning to find out what they paid, and it was right there. So very similar in cost to that. But there are just a lot of things that go through that process. And so I'm bringing this up today, not that you need a decision today, because we've got a proposal. And if you're lukewarm to the idea, we'll put it on the agenda to approve an agreement with them to move forward on a build grant application. And if you're not, then we won't do anything, because we really still have that decision to make. Are we going to proceed with the budget which proposed a $2 million rehab of those 2 bridges, or do we want to look at what the TEEP study recommended, eliminating the bridges and entering into that conversation on the roundabout? Pretty big decisions to be made there. Obviously, we don't want to go through this grant process, spend the money to do that, and then say, well, we're not even interested in really doing that, because that grant will be focused on us eliminating some safety issues. That's part of the grant requirements, because we do have issues there on the ramp coming off onto Adams. Let's see, I remember some of the other long-term cost savings And in there, they talk about a cost benefit of not having to maintain those bridges in the future. And so, because to do this project is going to cost more than the $2 million to rehab the bridges, but the long-term effect is what'll play out. They talk about improving major entrances to the core. We've talked about, what that could really do. That's really a core entrance to our downtown area. And, I think we'd all agree it's probably
Terrible.
not very nice.
It's not very good right now.
That was a
Yeah.
pretty good word.
Improve traffic safety and as you look at it, there's really some opportunities, even though we're looking at possibly closing the Avenue A connection or Avenue B to connectivity down there with our downtown, but, via pedestrian, bike, what have you. So it's a big question as to, how risky we want to be. And it's a pretty neat project. I met with the Southwest Bricktown at their meeting last night just to kind of introduce, this is something that's being talked about. No
What were their
decisions have been made.
thoughts?
I'm sorry?
That was my major concern. Like, how
Yeah,
does this
how did they
factor
feel?
into the public input piece of?
Yeah.
Would we keep that same design we were looking at that does close off B, or would it be totally different based on the grant award?
If we go through the grant, it would be as this shows, closing that off, yeah. If we don't, well, we can still do the project and not go through the grant process and have a lot more time to study that. Obviously, we're going to spend a considerable amount more money. And so it could be a situation where you wait and see, do we get the grant? And if we don't, then do we reconsider the $2 million price tag and just keep it as is? And then that'll be a decision that will be there for the next 30, 40 years.
Well, I say long-term, we absolutely need to move away from those bridges. They're not sustainable. They're going to cost way more in maintenance than we would ever pay for that realignment or whatever we're going to do. I would be in favor of going for this.
Yeah.
Well, as I've learned over the years in terms of transportation developments, that one of the key components is leveraging your dollars. And to me, this is a wonderful opportunity to take the first step of many, many steps in leveraging $42,000 for the potential of getting 80% of
Several million.
Yeah.
of a
What percentage?
multi-million-dollar project.
Well, it's up to
80%.
80. Are
Up
all
to
the
80.
grants 80 or?
Yeah, and actually in the rule, they said they can even exceed 80%.
80%, yeah.
What was the reaction of Southwest Bricktown?
Last
last night?
and again, last night was just kind of a preliminary, and
Yeah.
we talked about maybe coming back in June, probably before this application gets completed, just to have kind of some more community meetings, more open house type setting. There were 2 or 3 residents there, but generally fairly positive, comments. I think, the whole idea of closing off a street that's been open is, worth conversation.
Yeah.
But in the long term, I think people see the benefits of what that might look like, enhance that corridor, enhance that entrance. And it's just, that whole thing obviously wouldn't be designed like that today. I mean, it was
No.
designed like that years ago, but pretty sharp turn. And the off-ramp off of, Woody Seat on to Avenue A,
Oh, I
you go
hate
over
that.
3 lanes to
I
get
hate
to
that.
the left
A
turn,
left
which
turn.
most people want to do.
Yeah.
So that'll play into our favor just on the accident
Well,
side of things.
and the fact of the matter is, we looked at doing this anyway and paying all
Yes.
those millions. We're going
Right.
to pay all those millions.
Yeah, exactly.
Or we could potentially
Take a
get
shot.
80% funded.
Yeah.
And, we can, it's a competitive process, and we're going to have to, spend some time working that process and make some contacts. And, but I was pleased that, just the rural focus of some of this money and how they're spreading it out. And, we've got between now and July 15th. So, it's a quick turnaround to get an application put together that, and it's a pretty extensive looking application. There's a cost benefit deal through there. And, but I think in Hayes' case, it paid off pretty well. But,
What's the expected or anticipated cost to eliminate bridges, do the roundabout?
roughly 6, I don't want to get carried away with numbers because that's
Yeah.
very preliminary, but
Right.
6 million plus. Yeah.
Yep.
Let's just say over 6 million.
Yeah, over 6 million. And what we would do if I'm hearing a little bit of support, that we would come back May 21st with a proposal from this company. And then, so you've got a couple weeks to think about it, more input,
Yeah, I read
but we
this.
definitely will make major efforts to, it's not just the neighborhood decision, but the community on this, because, as we all know, roundabouts here have had their history, but I think people are starting to see them. And
Yeah.
if you visually go down there and look at that park from that side
Yeah.
looking south, and you see the mound of dirt and the guardrails, and imagine that all being gone
Flat.
in a
Oh, it'd be-
roundabout
yeah.
park setting.
Terrific.
Well,
It
there's a
could
lot
be-
of green space that opens up.
It could be
A
really
tremendous
a
amount of
cool
green
deal.
space.
So, and a place for an entrance sign maybe that's on our property and not KDOT. So,
Yeah.
Maybe
So
we
that-
could even name it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So that's really what I wanted to
Very
do
good.
there. That was just kind of a
Yeah.
recent development. We hadn't really talked much about the build grant, but I knew Hayes had that, and quite frankly, didn't even know that it was the new Tiger.
Tiger.
So,
Well, based on the fact that they have a somewhat proven track record, they've had a certain level of success in Hayes, and you named another
Right.
community. Yeah,
Wonderful.
I would be warm to the idea of pursuing that. Leveraging
Yeah.
the dollars
Yeah.
appeals to me as well.
so we'll bring back a proposal on the 21st and
Very good.
and give you a little bit
Okay.
of time to think about
Great.
that.
Okay.
Awesome.
Sounds
Read
good.
the document.
And
Very
that
good.
is
Anything
that
else?
is all I have.
Very good. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Wow, that was fast. Second.
Second.
Second, sorry, I have a few.
Roll, please.
Deckent,
Yes.
Dave Line.
Yes.
Soldner.
Yes.
Tyra Stickervallo.
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes.